Hello and welcome back to the Soccer Business podcast. I'm Simon Evans, and with me this week to look over the events in Austin, the MLS Board of Governors meeting and the MLS All-Star, is Alex Silverman, the soccer correspondent for the Sports Business Journal, soccer and hockey as well, he covers. Alex, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure spending some time with you down in Austin at MLS All-Star, and looking forward to breaking it down with you.
Yeah, so we were in the Fairmont Hotel in Austin, which was the main hotel used by MLS for the All-Star week. Now, obviously, the All-Star game Wednesday night is a sort of celebratory event, a sort of fun event for fans and players. They do a skills challenge the night before as well. But what interested us as sports business reporters, of course, was the meetings that were going on around it. The Board of Governors meeting of MLS and MLS Next Pro had their Board of Governors meeting as well. Lots of other people in town. It's quite a packed scene in the hotel lobby. Pretty much 3 days of non-stop conversations going on for everybody. Just to give people an idea, Alex, of what it's like inside that. It's an MLS bubble, really, in the middle of a city, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really one of my favorite industry events of the year to attend. Everyone from around the league is there. DonGarber, during his press conference, said this was the first time where they had literally all 30 owners, chief soccer officers, and chief business officers from every team. So that should give you an idea of, the level of people that were there. And then, of course, you have people from sponsors, of course, with League MX All-Stars being the opponent for the game. You had a lot of League MX, league and club folks, media people. So yeah, it was buzzing. The hotel bar every night, where there were people there late, even after the game. People as high up as DonGarber and his deputy Gary Stevenson were hanging out at the hotel bar. So it's a great event for people who do what we do to kind of get the pulse of how things are going.
I certainly got the impression, the feeling that there's quite, we talk about the World Cup coming to the United States 2026. It's going to give, an extra boost to the game and so on. I don't think it's going too far to say you could feel a bit of the energy of that. No, I mean, I think most of the people I was speaking to were talking about future plans, about the work they're doing, their expansion ideas for their clubs or their leagues. And, there wasn't a lot of sort of difficult decision, cutbacks or dealing with sort of negative stuff at all. It felt a very sort of upbeat mood, or am I being a little bit naive there, Alex?
No, I don't think you're being naive. I think, this is a time when people are very bullish on the sport based in part, at least, on what they think the World Cup next summer is going to do. And, I definitely heard some people say, is MLS doing everything it needs to do to capitalize on the, kind of overall growth in soccer? That soccer is a very fragmented sport, unlike, some of the other sports here in North America, and MLS is really just a piece of the pie. So is MLS doing everything that it can do to ensure it grows its piece of the pie as much as possible with the World Cup? So no, I don't think you're being naive in the sense that there's a lot of enthusiasm around the sport and even the league. But I think at the same time, there's definitely questions about MLS's direction. We once again had a Board of Governors meeting pass where there was no formal decision made on whether the league would adopt the European calendar, something that DonGarber kind of presented in his remarks as pivotal to the future of the league, what he's calling MLS 3.0. So yeah, I think overall the mood was high, but at the same time, I think there's some people who want to see a little bit more aggressive posture from the league.
Right. So let's get on to that, because we went into that expecting our main news story to be that they would, if not vote, certainly give a very clear indication that they were switching to the international calendar or the European calendar or the fall-spring calendar, whichever way you want to describe it. Again, in April, we were given a build-up that there was maybe going to be a vote. There wasn't. We're going this time. They were a little bit more cautious in setting expectations, perhaps, but there wasn't a vote. But at the same time, we have DonGarber coming out afterwards and really talking up the idea. I mean, he clearly is 100% behind this. The league office has been working on putting together the plans, so there's no question where MLS as a institution stands on it. They want to do it. It comes down to the club owners, right? We've heard all the concerns about the cold winter markets. From the way Garber was speaking, we have to almost do criminology, don't we, after a Garber press conference, because it's not always going to be a clear, straight-cut answer. He can't say everything. He's got an ownership group there that have different views. He's got to be slightly careful. We understand that, but he was, I thought, pretty positive about the chances of getting that calendar change through. No, do you think that winter problem has been solved in some way?
I don't know that's necessarily been solved, but I think from everyone that I've spoken to, a few in the ownership ranks and more in the kind of high-level executive ranks at the clubs, they're looking at this point as a when it's going to happen as opposed to an if it's going to happen. There definitely are things they still need to sort out as it pertains to the weather situation. There are going to need to be some significant infrastructure investments by those cold weather teams, indoor training facilities, heated pitches, potentially some stadium alterations. And I think one of the issues surrounding that is whether those owners are going to be compensated in some way, because obviously when they built their stadiums and purchased their teams, this was a spring to fall league. So, that's a material change for them to go to fall to spring, and they feel like they should be given some assistance by the teams that are really going to benefit the most from this, which are those warm weather teams. Warm weather owners aren't necessarily keen on that. I talked to Dan Hunt, who's the president of FC Dallas, and he said he understands the position of those cold weather teams, but that they've had to deal with playing in the 100-degree summer in Texas for 30 years now. So, I think that's one thing, but I think what's pretty telling is Paul Tenorio from The Athletic reported, I haven't confirmed this, but he's a very plugged-in reporter. He said that they did a straw poll in the meetings, and that 27 of 30 MLS owners, raised their hands in favor of the change. So I still think this is a when it's going to happen, not if. There are certain things they need to iron out. And I think, beyond just the ownership issue is the collective bargaining agreement kind of hanging over this. That current agreement between the league and the players union expires after the 2027 season. Obviously, the players would have to sign off on any sort of major change like this. And I think there's concern that from the owners that the union is going to try and extract some concessions in exchange for a change this significant. Even though I think most players probably also would favor this move.
Yeah, I mean, I think before the meeting happened, Jonathan Tannenwald had a piece where he quoted a leading executive at the Philadelphia Union, who obviously wanted those cold weather markets, saying that they think the league had found a way to alleviate the problem. Now, whether that is compensation or whether it is actually the structure of the country, because I heard some people intimate basically that there will still be a winter break. But it won't be a break between two seasons. It'll be a mid-season break, and how they organize that? Do they put other games play mostly the games in the southern warmer markets during that period and manipulate the schedule to fit the calendar? That would make sense. But I also heard somebody suggest, and it was just a suggestion from somebody on the outside, that maybe League's Cup could be used in that period, so that the amount of league games played during the colder months would be limited for those teams. So I guess some of that fine detail we need to hear about. Maybe, I don't know, Garber was indicating that there'll be quite a lot to talk about at the press conference he does in December around MLS Cup. But the Players Union, it seems, haven't been involved directly in these talks, right?
No,
That is a little bit surprising to me.
not to this point. I think the relationship there is a little bit tense right now. We saw that there was a pretty public battle over the bonus money from the Club World Cup, which, for those who haven't been following it, that money was capped at $1 million per team, just based on the CBA, despite the fact that, the prize money for the Club World Cup was a lot higher. They ended up ultimately coming to a compromise. But yeah, I think we're seeing a bit of friction in that league and union relationship. I think that there's, some concern from ownership that the players are going to try and extract some concessions in exchange for going along with this change. Now, they have to, negotiate a new collective bargaining agreement pretty soon, regardless of this change. So we'll have to wait and see whether they can get this change implemented, prior to the expiration of the current deal, because I think people are still looking at 2028 season as a long time away. Obviously they are past the point of being able to do this coming directly out of the World Cup in 2026, which I think was the hope of a lot of people. And some people feel like it was a missed opportunity not getting.
It felt like a natural moment to make a switch, didn't it? Yeah.
Right. Well, because they have to stop next season for an extended period of time anyway. So why not, start your new season right after the World Cup in August of 2026? But that ship has sailed at this point. I think now eyes are on 2027. But in order to implement this for 2027, they would either have to come to some kind of agreement with the players under the current collective bargaining agreement, or probably it makes more sense to negotiate a new agreement a year early. But those discussions haven't really begun formally yet. So I reached out to the union and they weren't willing to comment at this time, but I have a feeling we will start to hear from the union on this matter, fairly soon, now that DonGarber has come out so strongly saying that he didn't say it's when, not if, but he, really, when he was laying out his vision for MLS 3.0, made this, the number one pillar of it. So I think we'll hear from the union on this matter soon, and that will, give us kind of an idea of whether this is going to be a difficult situation on the labor side or not.
I mean, also related to that on the CBA front, they're going to have to, Garber did talk about the reform of the roster rules, which is a euphemism for spending money on players' salaries and the money that gets spent on transfer fees and so on, stuff that directly impacts players, arguably more so than anything else that the league does. We didn't get a really much of a strong indication on that from Garber, other than the ambition is to win the Club World Cup, which is a new way of saying they want to be one of the top leagues in the world, which he's said for a long time, of course, and that's always the lofty goal for MLS. To get there, I did some calculations, and I think MLS would have to quadruple its spending on salaries to get even close to the top five in Europe. So, I mean, the French league that would get them close to the French league, which is the lowest spending of the big five leagues in Europe. So there's a lot to happen there. Again, even less detail really on what that might look like.
Yeah, and I think part of what makes this also complicated is if you're going to make these major changes, you probably want to do them all at the same time. They all kind of affect each other, have consequence. If you change the schedule, that impacts the transfer windows, and that obviously directly impacts player compensation and roster rules. I think that one concern, the roster rule thing is, there's a few different areas that I think they want to reform. I think part of it is just simplification of the rules so that it makes it easier for fans to really understand what's going on.
And journalists, I think. Yeah.
Journalists, yeah, I'll be the
I'm
first.
looking forward to not having to use the phrases TAM or GAM ever again.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's part of it, is just simplifying these rules that, maybe at a certain point in the league's evolution were necessary, that maybe now it's just a little bit overly complex. And then part of it as well is giving owners who want to make their teams able to compete on the world stage, giving them the freedom to do so. That could involve there's any number of ways that you can do that, whether it's sort of getting rid of all these player classifications and just giving them, sort of a higher salary cap overall, and giving them sort of free reign to allocate their money however they want within that salary cap, or, maybe sticking with some of their more traditional mechanisms that they have and just expanding the number of designated players, which are players whose wages don't count against the cap. We didn't really get much of an indication from Garber in his remarks, but the point is, all of these changes that, if you're going to make them, they're probably going to be rolled out at the same time as quote unquote MLS 3.0. So it's very complicated. These are seismic changes, and I think once they make them, they don't want to have to go back. So they want to make sure they get it right.
I mean, one of the things that we often hear people talk about and we see reported in the media is that there are some MLS owners who really want to go hard on the spending. There are some who are quite happy with the way things are now, and there are some who would be open to maybe a more moderate, gradualist, traditional MLS approach, but involving some change. Those sort of three camps, really. Do you think that's accurate based on the conversations you had there with owners? I mean, for me, I kind of get the feeling that the group who want to push harder and spend more feel a little bit more confident and less frustrated than they did maybe a year or two ago. But I'm interested in your impressions from your conversations.
Yeah, I do think that is sort of how it breaks down. I don't think MLS is ever going to, sort of do away with a salary cap altogether. Even in, the sort of free spending world of European football, where, now we've seen all these financial fair play regulations put in place to, sort of limit the amount that teams can spend on their roster. So, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where MLS is doing away with a salary cap altogether, because it's in the owner's best interest to sort of have cost certainty and and control or limits on how much players are earning. But yeah, I think that's sort of how it breaks down. There are the folks that want to do away with these mechanisms altogether and just make it as simple as possible, and then there's some folks that still believe that these mechanisms are useful.
I mean, it comes down really to that whole thing about parity, doesn't it? That I think that, and this is where I see MLS at a bit of a crossroads, really, where, Garber said during his media availability that the parity is one of the strengths of MLS. There's not many leagues where anyone can beat anyone any weekend. We've seen LA Galaxy go from champions to being like an absolute disaster this season, in many ways as a result of the restrictions put on them in terms of the cap and them having to let players go after winning the title and so on, which just never happens in Europe, really. If they're going to open up to spending, the rich or the most ambitious ones will spend the most, and we will have less parity. Yeah, I mean, it does feel that is a decision that MLS has to make that's more than just about that structure. It's about what kind of leagues. Are you going to have Inter Miami and LAFC and Seattle Sounders and other clubs becoming a big five like you see in other leagues? Where do you see that one going at the moment?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you want to supposedly have a team that can really compete in the Club World Cup, they're going to have to probably be head and shoulders above the rest of MLS.
Right.
and we're already at a stage where, Lionel Messi is making more money than 20 teams full rosters. So to a certain extent, the level of parity is maybe we're moving beyond the parity era. But yeah, I think if your ambition is to be globally relevant, then you're going to have to let teams spend like that. And, if not every owner who wants to, that's certainly their prerogative. And obviously it's going to still be, teams in major markets are going to have an advantage in terms of attracting players, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's as much of a factor in, the English Premier League.
It is a little bit in the sense that international players want to live in London,
Right.
And if they don't want to live in London, they'll live maybe in Manchester.
Yeah.
But you do get situations like Newcastle United. I know they have this feeling that it's very difficult for them to hire international players to recruit them to go and live in the sort of extreme north of the country, as it were.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, not so much
Geographically diverse, and so. But yeah, I mean, I think another thing that's sort of interesting that was a big discussion point at All-Star was the Apple situation, the Apple deal.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we're in year 3 of the MLS Apple deal. It's a 10-year deal. There's reportedly an opt-out at some point. I'm not sure exactly when that is, possibly the 5-year mark, but I haven't been able to personally confirm that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion about, 2.5 years in, is it working?
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? And we had Dan Rayburn on this show, who's a streaming expert who goes really into the weeds of streaming. He was under the impression there was a 5-year break clause in that deal. But of course, if you ask Apple, you don't get an answer, and if you ask MLS, you don't get an answer on that either. That's not something they're going to discuss until that clause is activated, I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah, but I will say we had a very interesting moment that, I really perked. Usually I feel like the kind of prepared remarks section of the commissioner's press conference, I don't expect anything that's going to just completely catch me off guard. I figured maybe he'll go a little bit more off the cuff in the, Q&A section. But when he kind of, without being prompted, dropped a number, about a viewership number for Apple streams, that is something that's been, unheard of over the first few years of.
We've had no data at all on it, really.
Apple is a black box, and I think from my understanding is MLS has sort of had to adopt that posture. I don't think it's necessarily their preference to be quite this tamped down on the numbers. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear DonGarber say that their matches on MLS Season Pass are averaging 120,000 unique viewers. Now, it's sort of a piece of information that maybe creates more questions than answers, because quote unquote unique viewers is not typically how we talk about sports viewership. When we see traditional linear network release the numbers that are measured by Nielsen, we're talking about average minute audience, meaning the number of folks that are watching at any given point during an event, as opposed to unique viewers, which we don't know exactly. They didn't elaborate on what qualifies as a unique viewer, but essentially that presumably means anyone who watched at any point during the match. So that's an important distinction.
It is, because we don't know if that just means somebody who clicked on for 6 seconds. I mean, it's the same with YouTube type data, isn't it? It's not really the same as Nielsen stuff.
I mean, I would imagine that there is some threshold for time on the stream, and we've heard MLS and Apple tout that I don't have the exact numbers that they've mentioned in front of me, but that average length of watching, average minutes watched per user is up over 30 minutes, which is very strong. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be, oh yeah, they just clicked on for a few seconds, but we really don't know is the point. It's also interesting. He said that 120,000 figure was up 50% year over year.
Mm-hmm.
The 120,000 figure, I mean, no matter how you slice it, I don't think that's blown anybody out of the water with how strong it is. So I mean, to say that it's up 50% year over year makes you wonder, or it raises concerns about just the overall level of
what year two was like. Yeah.
Year two, I mean, they sort of rolled back a bunch of the promotional stuff that they were offering in year one, and that likely played a role in the I don't know. We don't know that it was necessarily a decline from year one, but in year three, they've introduced some new accessibility kind of mechanisms by partnering with Comcast Xfinity and DirecTV, EA Sports, bringing back free trial or a free subscription promotion with T-Mobile for all their customers. So, and then also introducing Sunday Night Soccer, which is a standalone match every Sunday that, it makes sense that a standalone match is going to draw more eyeballs than a single match when there's 5 matches taking place at the same time on a Saturday night. So there's a lot of complicating factors. Also worth mentioning that, this is a global streaming service. So it's not just 120,000 unique viewers in the US, it's 120,000 unique viewers worldwide. Whereas when we're talking about viewership numbers for, telecasts and for other sports, we're typically just talking about the domestic numbers. So I don't think
Although I will say my understanding is that the vast majority is within the United States. They're not really. I think the hope they had was that Messi would allow them to get European, South American, and obviously Argentinian, but also those Asian Messi fans to be tuning in on their iPhones and watching it, and it's not really happened.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know this at all. I'm just speculating, but I would guess that outside of the U.S. and Canada, Argentina would probably be the market where there's the most engagement with this service, just based on.
You would think so, yeah.
And I think that Apple was very happy that Messi came aboard because they, their iPhones, I guess their market penetration in Latin America is not as high as it is here in North America. It's more, Androids have a bigger market share down there. So
yeah.
I think they saw that as an opportunity to grow their business in Latin America. But yeah, like I said, this number it's good, and I mean it's good to have some figure as someone who reports on this, and I think sponsors, have seen some data, but the fact that Garber had kind of pledged to be more transparent with the numbers going forward, I think is welcome news around the industry.
Oh yeah, I think so. And to be completely fair, I think, if that's an average over 15 games, then that's, I think, 1.8 million people watching MLS over a weekend, if we take that number with all the caveats about what that 120,000 may or may not be. But if it's over a million watching MLS at a weekend, that probably is better than most people were fearing, I would think.
I think it is better than most people were fearing, but it's also, when you consider that a single EPL telecast can do, 1 million, for one match, where if MLS is doing that for their entire, match day, for an entire week of matches, essentially, that's pretty limited exposure for sponsors who are looking to have their brands out there.
Yeah, and the impression I get from all these conversations around Apple is that MLS are pushing on the access and distribution side of it very, very hard, aren't they? That I suspect, and again, this is just speculation from my point of view, that most of these distribution initiatives around direct TV, which gets them into potentially into more bars, that around bringing back the T-Mobile opportunities and all that sort of thing. I get the feeling that's really MLS who's pushing that rather than Apple. So it'll be interesting to see next year whether we see even further sort of diluting of the exclusivity of it being on the Apple platform, and whether that break clause offers an opportunity for, if it exists, offers the opportunity for MLS to maybe look at linear partners as well, because Fox are currently one of the linear partners, and I think Univision as well, right, on the Spanish side. So
Yeah, that's just for Leagues Cup with Univision. So it's really just a weekly match on Fox's net channels.
So it'll be interesting, whether there's any movement on that in the future, but. It does seem, it's a little bit more positive, I would say, than the narrative around Apple has been for quite a while. Yeah?
Yes, I would agree. I do think that the league is going to, he talked about kind of, and it was very vague, but he talked about in his remarks about evolving the relationship with Apple. I'm curious whether they are long-term going to stick with this season pass model being its own standalone streaming service at $15 $15 a month for non-Apple TV Plus subscribers. I think $13 for Apple TV Plus subscribers, because it really does just put you in this really limited silo. And people that I've spoken to have said that they've had good success with the games that they've put on Apple TV Plus outside of the season pass paywall, that those numbers are significantly better than the games that are just strictly behind the season pass paywall. So I don't really know exactly what the economics of it are, and whether it would require, if they would still receive the full $250 million a year that they were getting, or if it would change the potential revenue sharing element of it. But whether they stick with that model, I think is, so this is sort of informed speculation, but what I think that there's a chance that they maybe go away from that and try and get integrated into Apple TV Plus more closely. And I think MLS to a certain extent was betting on Apple getting more involved in sports than they have. MLS, aside from a once a week Friday night baseball game, is really the only sport on Apple, in the Apple ecosystem. And people aren't going to Apple to watch sports unless they are specifically going to watch MLS. There's rumors that Formula One, and that this has been reported by Adam Stern at Sports Business Journal, that Formula One's in talks with Apple about those rights. I mean, that would bring a huge influx of users to the Apple platform, and maybe MLS can draft off of that.
Yeah, it's interesting as well that the little presentation we got at the start of the week on Leagues Cup, they pointed out that the knockout stage of the Leagues Cup is going to be entirely on Apple TV Plus, so not behind the season pass paywall, and quite a number of games in the group stage too. And they were emphasizing that point. So I think your antenna has been on the mark there, because it's not a sports destination. In short, Apple TV. It may be more of one if they get F1 and if they got some other soccer content or something. Whereas there are other streaming platforms that you pay the money and you go to and you get multiple leagues, and MLS isn't in that position. So pros and cons to that, I guess. But it's an interesting one. And when going back to the criminology, when DonGarber talks about evolving a relationship with Apple, that is different language than we were hearing 2 years ago. It's a slightly different emphasis. Let's go more broadly on what Garber was talking about before that All-Star game. I mean, the phrase, you've mentioned it a few times there, MLS 3.0. We were having a chat at the airport yesterday trying to work out exactly when MLS 2.0 was. Did you manage to find out, or we're in that kind of area around 20, 20 years of
I
MLS?
haven't really figured it out. I think um, sort of the internal mythology of MLS, 2002 was a very key inflection point for the league. They launched Soccer United marketing into that, coming basically they were in real financial different dire straits at that point. Garber convinced the three remaining owners at that point, Phil Anschutz, Robert Kraft, and Lamar Hunt, to sort of double down on their investment in the sport. Launched Soccer United marketing, which at the time involved World Cup broadcast rights. So I feel like, I don't know, my theory is that 2.0 maybe started at that point, and that now they're talking about 3.0, but not entirely sure.
Yeah, I always had the feeling that 2.0 was more when the soccer-specific stadiums started.
Which was
When
kind of around that same era. I think the historic Crew was the first one that opened in '99, and then you had Home Depot Stadium or Park, which is now Dignity Health Sports Park in LA, 2003. The stadium in Dallas in 2003. So I think that was sort of part of that coming out of 2002, and then kind of later in the aughts and early 2010s, we really started to see more of a proliferation of the soccer specifics. But so I mean, I think that's sort of the timeline on those.
Yeah, and obviously the last decade since they celebrated the 20th anniversary, we're on the 30th now. Last decade has basically been a new team every year, and we're hardly talking about expansion now. We've got to 30 teams, and who knows whether there's going to be another 3 or 4 added over the next few years. I did actually ask DonGarber about that, and he said it wasn't something that they were looking at right now. And in fact, they consider these new stadiums in New York, Chicago, and Miami that are coming online in the next few years to sort of be giving them the kind of impetus that sometimes they get out of an expansion team, with Chicago being much more downtown presence, almost like a new franchise in that sense, and so on.
Yeah,
But
it's. I don't think you can really overstate how huge it's going to be to have new stadiums in Chicago, Miami, and New York. I mean, Chicago has been just such an underperforming club for the league from a revenue perspective. The Yankee Stadium situation for NYCFC has been certainly less than ideal, and the Fort Lauderdale situation for Miami was never a really long-term thing. So I think that will be huge to finally have your biggest markets potentially being your biggest revenue generators.
yeah, huge step forward. But MLS 3.0, I mean, general feelings when you walk away, you look back at what Garber was talking about, and we did have like a good hour with him there, really, didn't we?
Yeah, 45 minutes or so, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and it was one of those things. You're right. The opening remarks are normally, I usually record it in 2 chunks. One is the opening remarks that I'm probably not going to look at for my transcript, and then the second part is the Q&A. But the opening remarks were interesting with the Apple stuff thrown in there and a few other things as well. The impression he wants to give us is that MLS 3.0 is basically going to be a better, a higher level, a more successful, more profitable. Everything is just going to be an upgrade on MLS 2.0 or what we have now. Were there any other clues in there that gave you specifics on what he sees that next 10-year period being like?
Well, I mean, one thing that it got me thinking about, and that a couple of people brought up to me, is, I think the last 2 contracts that DonGarber signed or so, people thought, oh, maybe this will be his last contract. Maybe, he'll retire fairly soon. He's obviously the most significant person in the league's history and has, built it from a very fledgling and not really financially viable league into a pretty strong league and 30 teams. Is the time for him to step away when there's all these massive changes happening? Is he going to trust whoever his successor is to take the reins at such a pivotal time, or is he going to want to stick around to see it through? So I think that's, I also covered the NHL, as you mentioned earlier, and they're in a similar situation with their commissioner, Gary Bettman, who's a few years older than Garber. They've both been around for over 25 years in their current role, and there's a lot of speculation about how much longer they'll be in place. And yeah, it's interesting with Garber in particular, because if you make all these major changes, you'll either have a brand new commissioner overseeing them, or you'll have Garber sticking around into his 70s.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I've never really picked up many vibes off him that he's ready to go. I mean, I know some people have said, 1 or 2 more years and then Don will probably be moving on. I've never really felt that personally. I don't know, but I mean, it's his career. This is his baby, isn't it? He's built this thing in a way that, probably no other commissioner in sport in North America is as associated with the entire league and everything it's done, pretty much, since those rather difficult early days when he took over. So I think it'll be hard for him to let go, if certainly that, but are you picking up signals that maybe he's thinking that way? Or?
I mean, I think a lot of people looked at the World Cup as a potentially logical, milestone. Like, let's get past the World Cup, and his deal expires, I believe, at the end of the 27 season.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe that would be a logical point as he approaches his 70s. He has kind of referred to, in some recent press conferences as, in a few years when somebody else is standing up here,
Right.
And, I feel like I might be off base on this, but I think more than Gary Bettman, DonGarber has a life outside of
Right.
outside of MLS. He enjoys fishing and has other hobbies, and I think maybe he might want to enjoy his golden years more than a guy like Bettman, who I sort of feel like is much more. The league is his identity and his life.
Mm.
But this is all really, really speculative.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to think about, though. We're going to have an upcoming kind of project at SBJ where we're looking at who might be the next commissioners of all the different major North American sports leagues. So yeah, that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Yeah, I mean, if he does go after the World Cup, and there's logic in those timings as a step off point for him. It'll be a tough act to follow, I think, because he is so closely associated with the league and ultimately has been extremely successful in what he set out to try and do with this league. And I find I do actually enjoy these presses with Garber. I've covered a lot over the years of Premier League meetings and FIFA and UEFA meetings. You don't always enjoy them, but he has an ability with journalists that he's almost playing a little bit of a game where he just leaves you those little breadcrumbs. He leaves you a trail. He gives you some clues and something to think about, so that the criminology isn't just idle passing of time with trivia. It's actually worth going through sometimes. But a lot to talk about.
One other thing that we haven't, 45 minutes into this conversation, we haven't touched on yet is the Lionel Messi no-show situation at the All-Star game,
Yes.
which it's noon on Friday when we're recording this. And correct, I don't know if you've heard anything this morning from the league about whether or not he's going to be suspended for not playing in the All-Star game. But, I think the league has a very difficult situation on its hands here, where they have this rule where if you are not injured and you don't show up to play in the All-Star game, then you are suspended. On the other hand, I feel like Garber in his press conference sort of laid the rhetorical groundwork to let him off with a pass by saying how heavy his workload has been recently with the Club World Cup. Inter Miami has played more games recently than any other MLS team, and I think the stat that they mentioned was he's played 9 games in 35 days and played 90 minutes in all of them. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do, because if you make this exception for Messi and Inter Miami, then it's not a great look in terms of when you're the commissioner, you're supposed, and the league is kind of supposed to treat every team the same from a competitive standpoint. But on the other hand, I mean,
it's Messi. It's Messi, Alex.
He's an important part of the league's business plan. And Jorge Mas and Inter Miami have invested a lot of money in getting him over here, and I imagine it would be a slap in the face to those guys to have for him to be sat down for skipping what in reality is an exhibition game. But it's difficult. This is the first time in a long time that the league hasn't had a presenting sponsor for the All-Star game. Target from 2017 to 2024, and Target's deal was not renewed at all. They're not a sponsor of the league anymore here in 2025. And, I was kind of waiting for the announcement of who's going to be the new presenting sponsor of the All-Star game. That announcement didn't come. When they first released the All-Star kits, there was no sponsor on the front. They ultimately ended up giving that position to Old Spice, which is a Procter & Gamble brand. Procter & Gamble already a sponsor of the league, so presumably they didn't get, a huge chunk of money for that, if anything, and what could have been a make good. Hard to know. But you want the All-Star game is an important sponsorship revenue driver for the league, and not having that presenting sponsorship sold is a missed opportunity for them on a revenue perspective. And it would be a lot more of an appealing sponsorship asset if Lionel Messi's out there in your jersey and wearing your logo. So, you don't want the All-Star game to seem like a joke when you're trying to sell the presenting sponsorship for it. So I think it's a very difficult position for the league to be put in.
It is a very difficult position. I mean, Alex Ferguson used to say at Manchester United that no one player is bigger than the club, and that's why he was prepared to discipline people like David Beckham and sell players when they were at their peak if he wanted to, and so on. Lionel Messi is different. He's in a different category to everybody. He's definitely bigger than the club he plays for, and he's arguably, I think, bigger than the league he plays in. He will get away with it, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I would be very surprised if he's suspended for Saturday's game.
I did think it was interesting. I mean, Garber essentially, he threw some serious shade at Inter Miami management, saying, I think it was the last question of the press conference. Somebody asked him, why did you guys wait until the day of the game to announce that Messi wasn't going to be here? And he basically said, yes, we as a league should have known this a lot earlier. Kind of implying that Inter Miami waited too long to known that Messi and Jordi Alba wouldn't be there. So, yeah, there's some interesting dynamics there. But yeah, I think you're ultimately right that they probably won't suspend him. But I think that says a lot. If
it would also be quite American soccer business if they waited as late as they possibly could to suspend him.
Right. Again, like you're trying to sort of mislead fans who are planning on going to see Messi. And but at the same time, if you're a player if you're a fan who bought tickets to this game on Saturday, it's a home game for Miami against FC Cincinnati. If you're the kind of fan who's only going to go to one game a year and you really wanted to see Messi, and then he's suspended for not playing in an All-Star game, you feel like it's a pretty bad beat.
Yeah, Javier Mascherano, the coach of Inter Miami, this morning's availability, he made the point, which I thought was a fair one. He said, look, if this is such a big deal, this game, why is it on a Wednesday? Why haven't you stopped the league at the weekend and put the All-Star game on a Saturday, and it's, and then it's your centerpiece for that week of MLS? Now, the schedule is so tight around everything that's almost impossible. But he's kind of saying it's not that serious, really. That's what his message is, though.
It's not that serious, but it is a business priority for the league.
Yeah.
From a revenue driving perspective, and you want to have your best players there, especially, if any other player had missed the game, no one would really bat an eye. But it's, Messi is like you said, maybe bigger than the league. So it's a tough situation for the league to be in.
It is. I mean, my personal thing, just to finish, my personal view is the guy's getting $20 million a year. If you can't pop to Austin on a Wednesday night to do 20 minutes, run around the field, do a few tricks, wave to the crowd, sign some autographs and get back on your private jet, it's a poor situation if you can't do that when you're on $20 million a year. So that's my personal view on it. But we've had a good run there, Alex. We've had a little bit longer than we expected, but there were a lot of things went on that week in Austin. It was a lot of fun working with you there, and it's been a lot of fun talking about it with you here. People can find your work, obviously, at the Sports Business Journal, and any social handles you want to plug?
At Alex M. Silverman on Twitter or X. If you're in the business, definitely, feel free to connect on LinkedIn.
Fantastic, yeah. And don't forget our newsletter, The Soccer Business. You can also subscribe to that at our new website, which is thesoccerbusiness.com. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and we will be back with you again next week. Cheers.
Thanks, Simon.